In this video, I'll be discussing First Lieutenant Ela Aubrey Sofa's testimony. Here we go. Ela M. Aubrey was born on February 21st, 1920, in Fordsville, Kentucky, into a family that struggled through poverty and hardship. Her parents were Rhonda Frances Young Whistle and Thomas Aubrey. After her mother lost both children from a previous marriage and her first husband, she remarried, and Ela became the eldest child of this new family. The family eventually settled near Owensboro, Kentucky, where they rented a small farm. After graduating from high school, employment opportunities were scarce during the lingering years of the Great Depression. The family physician encouraged Ela to consider nursing and personally introduced her to the sisters at St. Mary's Hospital in Eanesville, Indiana. She entered the hospital's nursing program, where she quickly discovered both her passion for caring patients and demanding nature of professional nursing. When news arrived of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, Ela was working at a shift at St. Mary's Hospital, where she had remained after graduation, living only a few blocks from the hospital with two other nurses. She watched the nation suddenly transition from peace to war. Realizing that the country would require trained medical personnel, she volunteered through the American Red Cross for service in the Army Nurse Corps. After reassigning from the hospital where she had worked for more than 3 years, she reported for active duty on May 1st, 1942, at Fort Benjamin Harrison, near Indianapolis, India. She was accompanied by one of her high school friends, Louetta Carter, who also joined the Nurse Corps and later served with the 13th Field Hospital. Fort Benjamin Harrison served as both Ela's first military assignment and her introduction to Army life. While working at the station hospital, she adapted her civilian nursing experience to military procedures. Most aspects of nursing felt familiar, but psychiatry represented an entirely new challenge. Many of the patients she treated were young soldiers suffering from psychological problems. Some struggled with anxiety after military training, while others worried about their families they left behind or faced uncertainty about being sent overseas. This assignment became the only psychiatric nursing experience of her wartime career, but it taught her the emotional wounds of war could be just as serious as physical injuries. She also finally remembered Major Helgren, the chief nurse, who frequently accompanied younger nurses on walks to a nearby soda fountain under the pretense of walking her dog, Caesar, when she was really making sure the junior officers stayed out of trouble. Christmas and New Year's in 1942 were spent at Fort Benjamin Harrison, where officers attended receptions hosted by post commanders. Shortly after the beginning of 1943, the Army announced that a new field hospital would be activated. Volunteers were requested, and Ela immediately stepped forward. She was assigned to the newly organized 12th Field Hospital and departed at Fort Benjamin Harrison on February 26, 1943, traveling by train and 16 other nurses under the command of 2nd Lieutenant Frida Martin. The group arrived at Camp Bowie, Texas, where the 12th Field Hospital officially began organizing for overseas service. Here, Ela became part of the 2nd Platoon, alongside a group of Army nurses who would remain together through nearly the entire European campaign. After arriving at Camp Bowie, Texas, Ela's life changed dramatically as she transitioned from working in a permanent military hospital to preparing for service with a mobile field hospital. The newly organized 12th Field Hospital was composed of personnel across the United States who would eventually become a close-knit team through months of demanding training. At first, nurses lived in barracks, but they were soon moved into tents, where they learned to live under field conditions. Surrounded by snakes, armadillos, dust, and unpredictable weather, training was relentless. The nurses learned both to pitch small pup tents and the much larger hospital ward tents. assemble and disassemble medical equipment, dig foxholes, and lather latrine trenches, and march long distances carrying heavy packs while wearing oversized men's shoes, leggings, steel helmets, and field equipment. Bivouacs were established in open fields among sand and tumbleweeds, giving the nurses their first taste of conditions they would later experience overseas. During exercises, officers often ate from the back from a 2.5-ton truck, while enlisted personnel remained in the field. Ela remembered that although everyone came from different parts of the country, the officers, nurses, doctors, and enlisted men quickly learned to work together as one organization. The Army also introduced the nurses to C rations and K rations, although she joked that Texas still provides some of the best food they would eat during the war, especially its plentiful beef and fresh vegetables. Classroom instruction explained exactly how a field hospital functioned. The 12th consisted of headquarters and 3 independent hospital platoons, each capable of operating as a separate 100-bed hospital. In May of 1943, the battalion left Texas and entered the vast desert training center established by General George S. Patton in the California-Arizona desert. This was one of the harshest military training environments in the United States, designed to prepare troops for operating under extreme conditions. The nurses initially traveled to Camp Granite, where tents and cots awaited them after an exhausting journey. Enlisted men brought them precious water each morning for washing and filling canteens, illustrating how valuable water became in the desert. Shortly afterward, the hospital completed construction and officially opened under the canvas on June 3rd of 1943, making the first time the 12th Field Hospital actually treated patients while operating entirely from tents. The mission supported large-scale Army maneuvers taking place across the desert. Daily life revolved around oppressive heat, blowing sand, constant thirst, and shortages of water. Nurses were required to take salt bath tablets to prevent dehydration, and because daytime temperatures became unbearable, many worked night shifts from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. to avoid the worst heat. Every morning, they checked their beds and boots for snakes, spiders, scorpions before getting dressed. Water remained so scarce it was hauled from miles away, yet the enlisted men managed to build makeshift showers for nurses whenever possible. They escaped briefly to Parker, Arizona, where they cooled off by swimming in the Colorado River before enjoying ice cream or cold drinks in town. Despite the demanding schedule, life in the desert also brought memorable experiences that balanced the hardships of military training. The nurses completed infiltration courses that required them to crawl beneath barbed wire while live machine gun fire passed only inches overhead. They climbed walls using ropes, negotiated obstacle courses, and learned many of the same field skills expected of combat troops. Weekend passes occasionally allowed them to travel to Palm Springs or Los Angeles, where they could enjoy real beds, restaurant meals, hotel swimming pools, and sometimes catch glimpses of famous Hollywood stars. During the period, Ella also met Lieutenant Arthur B. Stosva of the 138th Field Artillery Battalion. Art and his fellow officer Bill Kitchen frequently visited the hospital area, and what began as a casual visit gradually developed into a romance. Ela remembered whether the 12th Field Hospital moved, Art somehow managed to find them. They spent enjoyable afternoons together, even driving a tank on one occasion. I'll talk more on this later. Following completion of the desert exercises, the 12th Field Hospital departed California on August 13, 1943, arriving several days later at Indiantown Gap Military Reservation in Pennsylvania. Compared to the harsh desert, Indiantown Gap offered a much more comfortable environment. Additional nurses joined the unit, strengthening the organization before its overseas deployment. The nurses lived in the station hospital rather than tents and enjoyed recreational opportunities, including dances, theatrical performances, and even a concert by the famous Benny Goodman Band. During this period, Art Storsa visited Ela while returning from leave in New York. giving the couple valuable time together before they would eventually deploy overseas. In October 1943, the 12th Field Hospital crossed the Atlantic and arrived in Wales, where Ula experienced wartime Britain for the first time. The nurses quickly discovered that Britain had endured years of rationing and constant wartime restrictions. Blackout regulations remained in effect every night to protect cities from German air raids, and local families carefully conserved precious commodities, even bringing their own teaspoons of sugar when invited to afternoon tea. Although food remained scarce, the Welsh people displayed a remarkable generosity toward their American visitors, inviting many of the nurses to stay in their homes for evenings of conversation about family, the war, and life in America. Ela particularly enjoyed visiting Cardiff whenever she received passes, and finally remembered evenings spent in local pubs learning traditional Welsh games. One unforgettable experience occurred during the concert in Liverpool when German bombers suddenly appeared overhead. Bomb explosions became so loud the orchestra was forced to stop playing while everyone sat silently in darkness, hoping the concert hall would not be hit. When the raid ended, the conductor calmly resumed the performance as though nothing had happened, leaving Ula deeply impressed by the courage and resilience of the British people who had lived under bombing for years. Christmas of 1943 was spent in Wales, and her Delight Arts sofa managed to locate her once again, arriving in England with his artillery battalion. After several weeks in Wales, the 12th Field Hospital moved south into England as Allied preparations for the invasion of Europe accelerated. The unit established itself near the villages of Furnhurst and Midhurst in Sussex, where virtually every available military camp was preparing for the coming assault on Nazi-occupied France. The atmosphere changed dramatically. Training intensified, security measures became stricter, and rumors circulated constantly about when and where the invasion would occur. Unlike earlier training exercises, everyone understood that this was no longer preparation. They would soon be treating real combat casualties. The nurses continued refining their hospital procedures, unpacking and repacking medical equipment repeatedly until every member of the unit knew exactly where supplies were located. Surgical teams rehearsed operating room procedures inside canvas tents, while enlisted personnel practiced erecting complete hospital facilities in the shortest time possible. On June 6, 1944, the long-awaited invasion finally began. Although nurses from the 12th Field Hospital did not land on the beaches with the assault troops, they immediately understood that their own battle had begun. Throughout the day, reports filtered into England describing fierce fighting on the Normandy beaches. Every member of the hospital anxiously awaited for word of casualties. Within hours, wounded soldiers began arriving from France aboard hospital ships and circuit transport aircraft. Many had suffered gunshot wounds, shell fragment injuries, burns, fractures, and blast injuries sustained during the landings at Omaha and Utah beaches. Others suffered from shock, exhaustion, or drowning-related complications after landing craft had been destroyed offshore. As Allied forces expanded, the northern Normandy beachhead and had pushed inland during the summer of 1944. The 12th Field Hospital received orders to move to the continent, leaving England behind. The unit crossed the English Channel and entered France to provide medical support closer to the advancing armies. Establishing a functioning hospital in a recently liberated combat zone required tremendous effort. The nurses often found themselves working inside damaged buildings, abandoned schools, or hastily erected tent hospitals, only a short distance behind the front lines. Equipment had to be unloaded quickly, operating rooms assembled immediately, and wards prepared before the first casualties arrived. Following the breakout from Normandy, the 12th Field Hospital advanced rapidly alongside the Allied armies as they swept across France towards Belgium. Unlike the strategic fighting of earlier campaigns, the rapid advance meant the hospital rarely remained in one location for more than a few days. The unit constantly packed its equipment, loaded trucks, established a new hospital, treated hundreds of casualties, and then repeated the process further east as combat units continued advancing. The nurses became remarkably efficient at converting almost any structure into a functioning hospital. Schools, churches, public buildings, and large homes frequently became operating rooms and patient wards within the hours of their arrival. Although combat was moving further east, casualties continued pouring into the hospital with artillery bombardments, mines, sniper fire, vehicle accidents, and the fierce fighting surrounded fortified German positions. The optimism of the autumn campaign came to an abrupt end in December of 1944, when Germany launched a surprise Ardennes offensive, better known as the Battle of the Bulge. Almost overnight, the casualty load increased dramatically as American units fought desperate defense battles in freezing weather. The 12th Field Hospital found itself treating a constant stream of wounded soldiers suffering from gunshot wounds, artillery injuries, burns, and severe frostbite. The bitter cold created entirely new medical problems. Frozen roads delayed ambulances, snow complicated evacuation routes, and many patients arrived suffering from exposure in addition to combat wounds. Nurses worked long hours inside cold hospitals, buildings, and tents, often wearing multiple layers of clothing while caring for patients. Following the successful defeat of the German offensive, Allied forces reassumed their advance into Germany during the spring of 1945. For Ela and the personnel of the 12th Field Hospital, entering Germany represented the culmination of nearly 2 years of preparation, training, and combat service. The destruction they encountered was unlike anything they had previously witnessed. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble by Allied bombing campaigns, transportation systems had utterly collapsed, and civilian population struggled to survive amid shortages of food, shelter, and medical care. When Germany officially surrendered in May of 1945, the long war in Europe finally came to an end. Like many medical units, the 12th Field Hospital did not celebrate with extravagant festivities. Their responsibilities continued almost immediately as thousands of patients still required treatment and occupation duties began replacing combat operations. Religious services were held, prayers of thanksgiving were offered, and many members of the hospital quietly reflected upon the friends and patients who had not survived the war. One of the happiest moments for Ela's wartime service occurred only weeks after Germany's surrender throughout the war. She had maintained her relationship with Lieutenant Arthur B. Stovsa, despite frequent separations caused by military operations. On June 16, 1945, the two were buried in Belgium, while both remained on active duty. The wedding reflected the usual circumstances of wartime Europe. Fellow officers and nurses attended the ceremony despite destruction surrounding them. Even after the war ended, the 12th Field Hospital continued serving in occupied Germany. The mission shifted from treating combat casualties to supporting occupation forces, preventing disease outbreaks, and caring for soldiers awaiting their redeployment. Nurses also continued treating displaced civilians and former prisoners while public health efforts became increasingly important. The pace of war gradually slowed compared to the intense months of combat, allowing personnel to enjoy occasional recreational activities and travel when circumstances permitted. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more, click the videos on the left and the right. If you have any video suggestions or questions, comment them below. Have a great day.